Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video, we are once again going to recreate the Spotify homepage. This time, instead of coding it like I did in my last video, I'm going to use Webflow. So here's what the final product is going to look like. If you haven't seen my last video, I recommend watching it because this looks so similar to what I did in the last video and so similar to the actual Spotify homepage. I just found out about Webflow pretty recently, although it's been around for a few years. But I was just so shocked at how well it actually worked. So if you don't know what Webflow is, it's a way of creating a website from scratch without using any code. So I didn't code a single thing in this, and it was so easy to figure out. I ended up posting my portfolio using Webflow. I bought a year subscription to it because I liked it so much, and I'm really shocked at how cool it was. It was an awesome experience. So if you haven't already tried Webflow out, I really recommend doing it. I've heard some people complain that it doesn't give out great code, like it's messy and just not clean. I actually didn't even look at the code for this or my portfolio. I think the whole point of Webflow is that you don't have to look at that. But if that's something you're worried about, it's worth keeping in mind. The only complaint I had with my portfolio is that the images take a little longer to load than I'd like, but I think that's something I can optimize. Hopefully it's gonna not be an issue because I can fix it, but overall I was really surprised by it. Super cool. The only difference with this project and the one I did in my last video is that we're not gonna be able to play a song, unfortunately. To get the audio, for some reason it costs extra money, and I just didn't want to deal with that. With that being said, I'm fairly new to Webflow, so I don't know all the ins and outs, but I'm pretty sure you can add custom code. So I think there's a way that I could add my own code to get this audio functionality without having to buy that package. I'm not positive. That's something I have to look a little more into. But yeah, I hope you enjoy this video. I really enjoyed playing around with Webflow, so hopefully you do too. Alright, so I already added all the colors I'm going to be using. I just saved them here, so not too many colors. And I also added the assets that I'll need. So all the screenshots of the album covers and yeah, just any images I'll need. So we can get started by just getting the different sections in place. I'm going to start by creating a div, which I'm going to flex. This is going to house the side nav bar and the main body content. So within this, I'll add 2 more divs. And 1 more. This one here is going to be the side nav. This will be the main content. So let's give this outer div housing these 2 elements a height of, say, 88% of the screen height. And then the side nav bar is going to be a fixed width no matter what size the screen is. So rather than doing a percentage of the screen, we will give it a fixed pixel width, and we'll say 230 pixels. Background is going to be black, just like the Spotify homepage. And then if we go here, we'll make this background our lighter gray color. All right, then down here we have another div that will be the play bar. Let's give it the remaining height of the screen, which is 12 VH. And the background color is going to be that even lighter gray. So this one is actually light. Up here, the background should be our dark shade, which I think is this. Okay, so now those are in place. Let's start on the side nav bar. We'll start by adding our logo, which I already have in my assets, so I'll click it. Let's give it a height of 40. Now, the image is black. It's a black logo, so we're going to have to put a filter on it to make it white. Let's just invert it. And then we will give the logo some margin. Let's try margin 25. If I hold shift down while I do this, it'll apply it to all 4 sides. So let's try margin 25. All right, so that's what it looks like. We can go into our viewing screen And if we look at the actual Spotify, it looks very similar. So that's good. Let's move on to the next section. So I'm going to add, once again, another div for this. This is going to house the buttons to switch the page, but we're not going to add that functionality. So when you click the button, nothing's actually going to happen. But let's give this div some padding. We'll give it some X padding of 10. And then we will add our first link. Now we're going to have 2 text blocks in this, so let's flex it and add those 2 text blocks. This one is going to be the icon, and the second one is going to be the wording. Another text block. All right, so this one is going to say home, and this is going to be an icon. Now I'm going to link another YouTube video that explains how to download icons into your Webflow. I don't want to re-explain that, so I recommend you pause now, do that, and then resume. So hopefully you watched that video and you've already uploaded your icons. I'm going to go find the home icon, just copy it and paste it in. All right, we're gonna have to change that font to our material iconic font. Where is that? Here it is. Material design, and then we need to take the italics off, which for some reason by default it does that. I'm not really sure why. Okay, let's give our link some styling. We'll give it padding X 15. And padding Y 8. All right. Let's take away this underline. And then to this icon, we'll make it larger. We'll give it some, not padding, let's give it some margin. Let's try 15. I'll probably adjust a lot of the spacing once I compare it to the home page. All right, the text is going to be our lightest gray color, which I've already saved. And let's make this home semi-bold. One thing I should do is, let's change the font. This isn't what Spotify uses, but Webflow doesn't have the actual font they use, and I don't want to go through the process of uploading new font. I don't know if it's really hard. I haven't looked into it, but maybe once I learn Webflow a little more, I will make a video on that. And let's change this to semi-bold. Awesome. So now back to our link block. I'm going to round the corners, probably just 4 or 5 pixels. Let's do 4 pixels. They weren't too rounded. Okay, and then we'll say on hover, oops, let's go back to our link block. That's not what it, okay, so on hover, let's make our text white. And then on focus, we're gonna make our text white, and we're gonna make our background the lightest color, or light. Okay, so if we go into our viewing page, when you hover and when you click. So that's pretty cool, because if you watched my last video where I did this coding it from scratch, this is where I had to use some JavaScript, but with Webflow it just makes it so simple. That's awesome. So if we compare, I think that looks extremely similar. I could add some more padding in the Y direction to this link. Yeah, but other than that, I think it looks awesome. All right, so let's do that, and then I'll copy this and make our other 2 buttons. So let's try 10. All right. I am going to duplicate this and duplicate again. Okay, so this one is going to say search. And let's find our icon, which is also just going to say search. Awesome. And this one is going to say your library. And Spotify uses this cool icon, which Material Design Iconic Font does not have. So I'm going to use, rather than using a book, which logically that makes sense, I'm just going to try to make it look as close to Spotify as possible. So I'm going to use this weirder one called Equalizer, but it's got the vertical lines going on. So I'm just going to use that. Okay, so if we view it now, hover, we got our click action, compare. Yeah, I think that looks really good. All right, let's move on to this section. So we got playlist, and then create playlist and liked songs. So first, I'm going to add a margin to the div we made here, probably 20 pixels or so, and then I'll get started. All right, so to this, is that our div block? Yes, it is. Let's give it a margin bottom. I think I said 20. Should I do 25? Let's do 25 pixels. And then to our side nav, let's add another div block. And this is going to house our, it's got a title that says playlist, and then our 2 buttons with images. So first off, I'm going to give this div block some padding. We want it to line up with our icons, and up here our buttons had, I think the padding was 10. Oh, so of the entire div we had padding 10, and then of the buttons themselves we added more padding x 15, so let's give this padding x 25. Did I do that math right? I hope. Okay, and then we'll add some text, so a text box, and it's going to say playlists. So for this typography, we want this to be pretty small. I'm going to make it 12 pixels. I'll make this 15. The color is going to be our lightest gray. Oops. Do they have an uppercase option? Okay, that's kind of weird. I don't see an uppercase option, so I'm just going to retype this using caps. Then let's give some letter spacing. Probably just 1 pixel. Yeah. All right. So now we can add, well actually, let's give this some margin bottom. Probably about 15 pixels. Honestly, it might even be more, but. All right, we're gonna add another link block. Once again, this is gonna be flexed, and we're going to add our image. It's gonna be this add new song. Let's give it a height and width of 30 pixels each. And then we'll give the image a margin right. Where is the margin? Am I blind? Spacing. Let's give it a margin right of, I think up there we did 15, so let's do that again. All right. And then to our link block, we will add some text. I forget what it said. It said create playlist. Create playlist. And then to our link block, so we flexed it. Let's go ahead and say item center as well. Then we will take away the underlined styling, and we'll make the text white, which is up here. Yep, text white. Let's make our font semi-bold, similar to up there. Awesome. Then it has that hover effect where it's a little muted, and when you hover, it becomes this bright white. So what I'm gonna do is give it some opacity changes. So let's make the opacity, let's say 75. And then on hover, we'll make it 100%. So if we go here, on hover it becomes like that. Let's compare it. Yeah, I think that looks cool. All right, let's duplicate this and we'll do our other button. Let's give this some margin bottom. Not too much. It looked like maybe even just 5 pixels. Definitely more than that. All right, we'll go with 10. Liked songs. Liked songs. All right, let's change this image to the heart, and there we have it. So the last thing we need is that line separator. So I'm gonna give this, oh, it already has margin. Okay, cool. So let's add our very last div block. It's gonna have a background of our light shade. Its height is gonna be, let's try just 1 pixel. That looks great. Okay, now we have that scrolling section. So to our div block, or our side nav bar, we're gonna add 1 more div block. Once again, it's gonna have that padding of, was it 25? Yes. So we'll do padding 25 on the left and right. And we're gonna give it a fixed height because it's gonna scroll. So it's not too big. Let's say 50 pixels. That might even, let's go with 40. It's a pretty small section. And we're gonna say overflow Y scroll. So if I can find that, here it is. So overflow scroll. Okay, then within this, we're gonna have some more links. So I'll add our link block, and it's gonna say my album names. Honestly, I'm just gonna make up some album names. I don't feel like copying those. So run, why isn't it typing? I need to add my text. Okay, so let's add our text block to this. And my first made up album will be running playlist. All right, let's give the link some, here's the link block. Let's give it some font styling. So we will make the text our lightest shade, unless it's hovered, in which case it'll be white. We should make it smaller. Let's try 12. And we'll take that underline away. I wonder if I should make it smaller. No. Oops, I gave the font size on hover, which I did not mean to do. So let's go back and say 12 pixels. And I also did the underline on hover, so let's take that away. Let's see, why isn't that working? No underline. Okay, there we go. So I'll just duplicate this. Not the text block, but the link. Okay, duplicate, where is that? Right, so this div, we're gonna have to say flex and vertical. My next made-up playlist will be party. All right, and once again, we're gonna duplicate this. Let's duplicate a couple times. Okay, this one I'll call it, undo. That is so annoying. Just let me edit it. Okay. This one I'll say country, and up here I'll say hip hop. Okay. So now we have our little scroll section. And then next, I think we have another button. So we've got this button that says install app. I'm going to put this, I'll put it in the div with that. No, I won't. I'll make a second div to house this button and this image. So let's go back to our side nav bar and add one more div block. The first thing I'll do is add the link, as usual, flex, let's item center it. And we're gonna have an icon and text again, kind of like we did up above. So that will be our icon. And then, where's the link block, not the text block? We're gonna add another text block. So what does it say? It says install app. All right, say install app. And then that's going to be our icon, which is just an arrow down. So let's search for down. Here we go. I wish there was a shorter arrow down. Probably is. I'm not going to look for it. All right. Then I've got to change the font to our material iconic font. And take away the italics, which is so annoying that they do that. I don't know why it would be italicized. Okay, if we go back to our link, let's give it some padding because here it's got some pretty drastic padding. I'm not putting padding on the entire div because this image takes up the whole side nav bar. There is no padding. So I'll apply it just to the button. We already know we need that 25 on each side. It looks like in the Y direction we need maybe 10 pixels. And then in addition to that 25, it goes in a little more. So I guess let's make it like 27 pixels in the X direction and 10 in the Y. And then 10 and 10. Awesome. This icon, we will do margin right 15. And then I guess I should have looked for an icon in a circle. I don't know. I'll have to put it in its own circle, I guess. All right, that's fine. Let's go back. If we go to this text block, let's give it a border and we'll round it all the way. And the border color will be our light. All right. I gave the margin to the italic, so let's switch that. We'll take the margin off the italic and we'll put it on this text block instead. So we said margin right of 15. let's give it a fixed width and height so it doesn't smush like that. 15 and 15. Actually, we're gonna make it bigger, so we'll go 25, 25. And then to this icon, or we can stick to the text block. Let's give the text size 20 pixels. Yes. And then we'll also go ahead and say flex, item center, justify center. Okay, so to this overall link, let's take away that underline styling. We will give it the lightest shade, and then on hover, it'll turn white. Just like we did before. Let's go here and we'll make it semi-bold. And now that I'm looking at it, this is way too big. So let's switch it back. I think I had it at 15 initially. Let's go back. But that's too small. I guess 20 is the happy medium. And then the font size, I said 20 pixels. Let's go down to 16. So if we compare, it can definitely be even smaller. For sure. All right, let's go back to that 15. I was wrong. And if we had text 16, we can make that, I guess, 12. That looks better. Awesome. So to our link block, yeah. The last thing we want to do is to the div that I added this link block to, let's add the image. Down here. Choose, and it's this. All right, it's a little too tall. Dang. I don't want to crop it, but I guess I have to, huh? You know, actually, okay, there's a few things I actually need to change first. Now that I'm looking closer. Let's put this up. Oh, shoot. Look at that. Now it fits. Okay, so that's one thing I don't like about Webflow. It's just the sizing. All right. I guess that would happen coding too. I need to make this. Well, what happens here when we do that? Interesting. I'm just going to say overflow hidden. So if we go to this side nav block, let's just, where did they have that? Overflow hidden. So if we go smaller, let's go back to our view screen. It's just going to go away. Oops. All right. But we need to fix the spacing issue. So I guess I'm just going to give it some margin on the top. Probably not the best way to do it, but it's fine. When I learn Webflow a little more, maybe I'll make a revision video or something. Let's do less than 10. Let's try 5. Hopefully that's enough. Yeah. All right. Also here, we got to put some padding on that. These individual, I thought they were links. I think they are. On these links, let's give it some padding in the Y direction. on each one. So I'll say padding, not too much, probably just 5 pixels. I'll do it on that one, all 4. Oh, cool, it looks like it transferred over. Awesome, so now if we compare, we've got our hover, clicks, hover, we can scroll. Let's compare. Yeah, it looks extremely similar. I'm actually surprised. Webflow is pretty awesome. This image is still giving me some issues though, with the spacing. So I guess I can add a little more padding to this underneath playlist. That's about it. It looks awesome. So if we go back, playlists, I said padding 15, let's just make that 20. Okay, so now we can start with our main content over here. All right, so for this main content area, if we look at our Spotify homepage, it kind of has this header where when you scroll, it's fixed. These buttons up here in the drop-down menu. And only these cards are scrollable. So when we go here, we're going to have 2 divs. One is going to be that fixed header, and the other one will be the scrollable content area. So in this div up here, we are going to have another div containing our 2 round buttons. So let's add those buttons now. I'm going to go ahead and put our icon in. It's this chevron left. All right, if we change the font to our icon font right here and take away the italics again. Awesome. So let's take all the padding away from this button. If we hold shift, it'll apply to all sides. And instead, I'm going to give it a width and a height. Let's try 30 pixels width, 30 pixels height. And we'll round the border completely. And then to get that icon in the center, let's say flex, item center, justify center. All right. We can change the font. Let's try 20 pixels. 25. I think that looks good. And we'll change the color of our font to our lightest shade. Then the background, instead of this blue, will be black. Okay, I think that looks good, but we need to adjust the padding. So we've got, let's start off by making the width of this 100%. Say 100. And we can see that this side nav squished a little bit. So if we were coding, I would say flex none, but in Webflow, probably this, shrink 0. Awesome. So now to our header, we can add the padding. Make sure I'm in the right div, this one. Let's see, let's do padding in the Y direction, 15 pixels. And in the X direction, let's try 40 pixels. I'll probably alter those a little bit in just a second. Now this button, I'm going to duplicate it. If I go to the div containing these, I'm going to go ahead and flex it. And then let's change the chevron to chevron right. And once again, take away the italics. All right, this button on the left-hand side can have some margin right. Let's try 10. All right, let's take a look at this and compare it to our Spotify page. So I think The padding X on the header I set to 40. We could probably make that a little less. Let's try 30. And a little more spacing between these two buttons. All right. So if we go here, oops, which one is it? It's this one. First of all, I did margin here and padding there, so delete this margin, that should be padding, and we're gonna go down to 30. And then this button, I said 10, let's increase that to 15. And let's take a look. Yeah, I think that looks a lot better. Okay, so next I'm gonna create this drop-down menu. So to this, I'm going to add the drop-down that they provide us. I'm going to go ahead and flex this. We'll say item center and justify between. Now I think this drop-down has some styling that it probably has a weird margin going on, so I'll fix that in a bit. But to start off, let's just focus on this. So the icon, for some reason they make the icon absolute. I'm going to change that and make it static. So we'll have to go back to our drop-down toggle, flex it, and say item center. And then I want this text in front of the icon, so let's do that. I'm also going to add my profile picture. So I'll add an image. I'm going to give it a height and width, let's try 25. And once again, I want this to be in the front. Let's round it all the way. Awesome. Okay. Back to the drop-down toggle. Let's try, oops, if I hold shift, let's make the padding way less. Let's try 5. We'll give the background our lighter color and round the radius, the border radius all the way. Let's change the text size. Right now it's 14, let's make that 12. And we'll make the color white. And let's do font semi-bold. All right. Next, there's some weird spacing, and I wonder if it's from the icon. So it is. Let's make all of this 0. And then we'll individually give these some margin right. Let's try 15. No, let's do 10. That looks pretty good. Okay, change this to my name. I think it's looking good so far. Next, we've got to work on the drop-down list. Oh, this has weird margin. Let's make those 0. There we go. Now it's in the position we want. And we can focus now on the drop-down list. I'm going to make it block so we can see it for right now. We only have 2 in the list, so let's delete this third one. Let's go back to the overall list, not the individuals. Let's give some spacing here. We're going to round it, probably just 4 pixels. Background is going to be our card color. And the text will be our lightest shade of gray. I think I have to apply it to individual. Lightest, and once again, lightest. I'm going to give this a border top solid line. Let's make it like 0.6. And again, our lightest shade. And then we need this hover styling. So on hover, I want the background to be a slightly lighter shade. So let's go with that. I'm going to copy this and do the same to this button down here. On hover, background will be this. All right. And what do they say? Account and log out. Account, log out. Okay, that looks pretty good. So if we go back to the drop-down list and make it hidden again. All right, this is what it looks like. Cool, I think that looks good. I want that to stay up, stay up. One more comparison. I think that looks awesome. So now we can move on to the cards, which we're gonna put in this div here because this is fixed to the top. So this is a div that's gonna be scrollable with the cards. Let's go ahead and do that by making the overflow Y scroll. And then within that, we're going to put another div, and this is gonna house our first section. So even another div within that. This is going to have our two links, the title and the show all button. So let's put our link block in with some text. And this is going to say recently played. All right. So we got a div block with our first link. Now let's put our second link in. Link block with some text. This one is going to say show all. All right. So now to the div that has those two links, let's say flex, item center, and justify between. And then to this outer div, I'm going to give some padding. So let's give padding X 30 because that's what we did up above. And Y, let's do 15 pixels. Okay. Now I'm going to style these links. This first one, we're going to have it be pretty large. So let's change the font size to 25 and the line height to 25 as well. Okay. We're going to change the color to white. I want it to be semi-bold. And I don't want it to be underlined unless we're hovering. So on hover, we'll add that underline back. Now for this, I'm going to change the size to 12 and 12 here as well. The color is going to be our lightest shade of gray. We want it to be uppercase, and let's give some letter spacing of 1 pixel. And then once again, on hover, so we don't want to underline now, but on hover we do. So let's add that. And then I think I said item center. Let's actually do item start. Let's take a look. It's got our hover. It looks like we've got a blue underline. We don't want any underlines. So we're going to click on that link block. And there should be no underline. There we go. All right. So that's our header. Now we're going to add another div block. This area that's going to have our cards is going to be scrollable. So let's go ahead. It's all going to be within this div that's scrollable so that we have our fixed header. So let's say in the Y direction, scroll. Then I'm going to add another div to this, which is going to house our first title and first section of cards. And then another div, which is going to be our title div. So this title div, I'm going to add 2 text blocks to it. One is going to be that header, and the other is going to be the show all. Let's add another text block. All right. So to this div, we're going to flex it. Let's say items end and justify between. We'll give the div padding X 30 and padding Y 15. All right. Then this text block is going to say I think it's recently played. And here it's going to say show all. So here, let's go ahead and make the text white first off. We want it to be semi-bold. And let's make it 25 pixels. On hover, it's going to underline. And then, is there anything else? I think that's it. If we go over to the show all, we'll make the text our lightest shade of gray. We want it to be uppercase, which is this. We want it to be really small. Let's go with 12 pixels. Our line height can also be 12 pixels. And lastly, we want it to underline on hover as well. So hover, underline. All right. So let's go back to the div containing this div, because we're going to have that other container that's going to have the cards. So up here we did padding X of 30, and we want this to be consistent. So in this div, we're going to do padding X 20, but just trust me, it's all going to add up to 30 eventually. You will see in a little bit. So let's do padding X 20, padding Y 15 once again. All right. Then to this div block, I'm going to add columns, and we want 6 columns. All right, and these columns are going to have padding X 10. So this is where it evens out. It's going to equal 30. All right. Then to the column, let's add our actual card itself, which is going to have padding 20 in every direction. If we hold shift and just drag this, we'll get our padding. The background is going to be our light gray. Let's go ahead and round it, maybe by 6 pixels. Let's give it a box shadow. Maybe a little smaller. Not too drastic. All right. Now we can add our image. So to this div, we're going to add an image. And the first one, let's say this. Add some text. It's going to be the title of the song, which in this case is Daily Mix 4. We'll make this text white. We'll make it semi-bold. Actually, I don't think it's yeah. Let's make it 12. Actually, 14 was fine. And then lastly, let's give it a padding Y of, it's not really even, so let's do padding top 10, padding bottom 5. And I actually think a better way to do that would be keep padding Y5 and go to this image and we'll say margin bottom 5. Gives the same effect. It's a little cleaner in my opinion. All right, we'll add another text block. This is going to be the artist, which in this case is just by Spotify. Let's take this text. We're going to make it smaller, so this will be 12 pixels. The text color will be our lightest shade of gray. And let's give it a padding bottom of 10. Nice. I'm just going to copy this and put it in the other columns. All right, so let's switch out the images and titles. Lastly, we need to add that hover effect. So when we hover on the cards, it's going to have that green button to play the song or album. So let's go to this column and make it relative, which it looks like it already is. And we're going to add our very last div block, which we're going to make absolute. Have it take up the entire area. Then let's flex it. We'll say items end, justify end, and we're going to add a button. All right, we can take all the padding away from this button. And let's give it a fixed width and height. Let's try 30. Maybe bigger. Let's try 40. All right, and then within it, we're going to have our play icon. All right. Let's go ahead and choose our icon font, which is right here, and then take the italics off. Then if we go to our button, we can say flex, item center, justify center. Let's make this text or this icon much larger. We'll try 24. And then let's make our border radius completely rounded. Just like that. And lastly, our background will be our brand green color. If we go to this absolute div block, let's just give it some padding. How's that? Okay, looks like we're not going to be able to make it equal, which I was hoping for. Let's try 20 in the X direction. I think that looks fine. Change that to 15. It's a little too much. Awesome. So lastly, I'm going to make the opacity of this. Oops, I meant to just do this div. The opacity of this is going to be 0 unless we hover on it, in which case it will be 100%. So now if we go here, we've got it. So let's just copy and paste this onto every column. And let's test it out. Yeah, it looks really good. Awesome. So now if we compare it to the actual Spotify homepage, we have this animation. I forgot about that. So when we hover on this button, we can make this grow a little bit, which I didn't do in my last video where I coded this, but Webflow makes it so simple to do animation. So let's do it. All right, we'll just go to this button actually, not the div. And if we click this little lightning bolt, we can add, that's a bad one. We can add some animation. So let's say on mouse hover, we're gonna start an animation. I'll call it on hover, or I'll call it hover grow. I'll say size. Let's have it take up 0.1 seconds duration. Then it'll grow. The button is 40 by 40, so let's have it grow to like 42 pixels by 42. And we'll say done. And then on hover out, start animation again. We're gonna add shrink hover out. And we'll say, once again, size, 0.1 seconds, this time going back to 40 by 40. And done. So let's check it out. So, wow, it works. Super cool. Compare it to this. So while it looks really similar, there are a couple things I want to change. So let's do that. The first, I think we need some more padding here. So I said 15 in the X direction, 10 in the Y. So let's go up to 20 in the X direction. That looks better. Did it apply to all of them? It did. To create this next section, I'm just going to duplicate this div that we just made. And I'm going to change the name of its class, because if I don't add an additional class to this, any changes I make here will be applied up here. So I'm going to be changing the layout of this title area. So I'm going to call this for you, or actually I'll say for Steph. And what we're going to do is flex it vertically instead and put it back to the start. This text block, again, I'm going to change to for Steph title, and I'm going to give it a margin bottom of 10 pixels. This show all is going to be, I'll just say description. I'm going to take away the all caps. I'm going to keep it 12 pixels though. And so what these are going to say is made for Stephanie for the big text, made for Stephanie, and then below it, it'll say get better recommendations the more you listen. Then I'm going to make that text a little larger. Let's make it 12 pixels. 14 pixels up from 12. And on hover, we don't want an underline. So now we've got some scrollable content. It looks very similar to the Spotify homepage. Awesome. Obviously, we could change these album pictures. I'm not going to. I don't think it's necessary for this tutorial, but if you want to, feel free. Anyways, we can go on and get started with this play bar and finish it up. Okay, let's get this done. So we're down on this play bar. We need to make sure it's flexed and item center, because we're going to have essentially 3 different divs. One here, one in the center, and one lastly here. We're going to justify between, but I'll do that at the end. Otherwise, it's going to look a little goofy. So first things first, let's add this div, which is going to house this section right here. I already added some padding to this play bar. I did 15 in the X direction, so you can see that right there. Then within this div block, we're going to have one more div block. This one is going to have the title of the song and the artist. I'm gonna make it this song. So if we add a text block, I'm going to say Summer in the City. Let's make the text white, and we'll go ahead and make it semi-bold as well. And then in the same div, but below that, we're going to add another text block. So that's going to have text block. That's going to have the artist, which is the Lovin' Spoonful. And let's make this our lightest shade of gray. And let's make the text smaller. We'll do 12 pixels. Let's fix how that's spelled. The Lovin' Spoonful. There's only one L. All right. Then outside of the div housing those two text blocks, but within this div, if I didn't already, which I did not, let's flex it and say item center. We're gonna add two more text blocks. These are gonna have icons in them. So if we go to our icons, I'm gonna look up favorite. We're gonna get this heart and put it right in there. Gotta do our icon things to it, which means change the font to Material Design and get the italics away. Let's make this our green, and let's make it 16 pixels. And then lastly, we'll give it a margin in the X direction. Let's try 20. No? Yes. 20 pixels. That's padding. Let's do margin. Awesome. Then we will add another text block for our second icon. This time I think it's called Picture in Picture. It's not identical, but close enough to what Spotify uses. And we're just going to do the same thing that we did for that heart. We're going to change the font size to 16. The color this time is going to be our lightest gray. We're going to take the italics off. We have to, of course, choose our font and then take the italics off. And I think that looks great. So moving on, we can add another div block outside of this section. This div block we're going to flex. We're going to say item center and justify center. Then we're going to add another div block, which is going to house all of our icons. Once again, flex, item center, justify center, and let's add our first icon. We technically should be using link blocks because in the actual app, these are buttons, but I'm just going to use a text block because we're not going to add functionality to it, and it's easier to work with a text block than a link because a link is like underlined in blue, whatever. So let's get our first icon here, which is the shuffle icon. Put it in there. Oops. Let's make it 16 pixels, just like we did previously. Choose the icon font and change it to our lightest gray, and we'll take the italics off. Okay, I'm going to duplicate this text block 5 times. 1, or I guess 4 times. So there are 5 total icons. Okay, then let's add margin X of 20 like we did previously. Actually, that's too much. Let's just do 15. That's better. And then we'll change these icons. We got skip previous. Let's get the italics off. And then lastly, our repeat. All right, let's get the play button above that. So they're all in order to this text block that has the play button. We are going to flex it, item center, justify center. Let's give it a height and width of 30 pixels. We're going to give it a border fully rounded, and the border color is going to be the slightest. Oops, I forgot to change the class again. So let's undo all of that. Once again, I'm going to click on the text block that has the play button. And I'm going to name it play. Let's give it a width of 30 pixels, height of 30 pixels. Border, the color is going to be our lightest shade of gray, rounded all the way. That looks great. Then we need to get that play bar, so we're going to add another div block. Looks like I flexed this. I meant to flex it vertically. Awesome. To this div, let's give it a width of 100%. And then to the div block housing it, let's give this a width of 50%. Awesome. Back down to this, we're going to add another div block in it. This, we will say width 100%. We can say height 5 pixels, background color, oops, that's text color. The background color is going to be a lighter version of our background, so let's just go ahead and leave it at that. We're going to round the border fully. Then we're going to add yet another div within that div. This div, let's give it a width of just maybe 40%, height of 5 pixels. The background color is going to be our lightest shade of gray, and let's round the borders 100% again. All right, it's starting to really come together. Well, actually up here, we can give it a margin bottom, maybe a 5 pixels, maybe more. We can go to 10. Back down here, let's flex this and say item center. I'm gonna add a text block to it. I'll say 30 seconds over here. Let's change this to 12 pixels, our lightest gray. We could do margin 5 on either side. And then I'm going to duplicate it. This one will go above, the other one will stay there. And let's change this to 3 minutes, 10 seconds. All right. Then to finish it off, we have our last segment of this play bar, which is mostly just icons again, this section right here. So let's find these icons. The first one, I'll just use this. Not identical, but it's pretty close. This div block, I'm going to flex, item center, justify center. Let's add a text block, which is going to have this icon. As we did with all those other icons, we need to select the correct font, take away the italics, go back to the text block, change the text color to our lightest shade of gray, 16 points, and a margin X of 15. That's padding, we want margin. All right, let's duplicate this. And one more duplicate. Then we need the devices and the volume. Got volume here. Get rid of the italics. And let's find our devices. If I just search for device, there we have it. Okay. The very last thing we need to do is add another div block. We'll give it a height of 5 pixels and a width, let's just say 100 pixels. We'll give it a background color of our lightest gray. Let's round the border all the way. And then lastly, to this text block, we're going to call it volume, and I'm going to take this margin away. Actually, I'm going to keep it just much smaller. Let's try 5. Perfect. Now if I go to our overall div in the footer, let's say justify between, and there we have it. I think it looks awesome. Let's put it into our view screen and compare it. They look extremely, extremely similar. I think the obvious things that pop out to me would be that this is longer and a little thicker. But other than that, I think it looks great. So we've got our clickable buttons, our hover action, hover here, this little animation, drop-down menu. I think it looks awesome, and I hope you guys enjoyed.